Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life, the podcast. You're listening to 5 Minute Fridays with Coach Myrna. And today I want to use this segment to introduce my monthly theme for January and the first week in February. And I want to introduce this topic in this format because I've got three or so episodes that I've bunched together because of the theme that I want to explain the effects of childhood trauma in our adult lives. And the reason I group these women together is because each of these interviews highlights the effect of trauma in our adult lives. And what's been so powerful about these conversations is how trauma shows up, not only in pain, but in your pleasure, in intimacy, and identity. So the first episode or the first interview that I want to showcase in this monthly theme is what we learned about pleasure, identity, and worth as children, as showcased by Pamela Madsen, who is a sonomic sex therapist. And she notices that the people that come in, the women, I should say, that come into her retreats are having problem with pleasure. They don't know how they're not having any, right? And we know that almost 70% of women are in this bucket. So almost everything that is wrong in our lives can be traced back to effects of childhood trauma. So as I group these interviews together and weave them together this month, I want to start off with Pamela's interview, and that happened last week. So you can go back and listen to that. So Pamela taught us that there's a quiet truth many of us don't realize until adulthood. And we just didn't learn to survive as children. We learned how much joy we were allowed to have. You remember those? Go sit in the corner and not let me hear you. Yeah, some of us grew up with that. So Pamela Madsen shared a simple but profound story, one that stopped me in my tracks. She talked about three women and chocolate. How many of you like chocolate? I do. Probably 99% of you like chocolate. But what if when we were growing up, we had a different or a bad view about chocolate? Because you know that chocolate tastes good. Every kid wants chocolate, every kid wants candy, right? So, how we were allowed to enjoy our candy and our chocolate shows up in our adult lives and how we show up for pleasure. So, in the story of the women in the chocolate, one woman devoured it freely. Like, okay, I got to eat it before someone takes it away, right? One woman savored it slowly, almost reverently, right? Okay, I'm not going to get pleasure again. I'm not going to get this for some time. I better eat it slowly and savor it because I'm not quite sure when it's going to come again. And then the third woman barely allowed herself to enjoy it at all because she was filled with guilt and restraint. So, how Pamela shared how these women told this, you have to listen to the whole podcast to understand it. But what I want to show here is the theme, right? So Pamela asks the question, how many of us have never considered how we learned to take pleasure? Because pleasure, whether it's chocolate, whether it's intimacy, whether it's rest or desire, it is learned. And so is shame. How do we learn shame? Right? Someone told us that we were bad, right? And that's how we learn shame. We just don't wake up and feel shame. So for some of us, pleasure is celebrated. For others, it is controlled. And for many, it was punished or taken away. So, what's your story? How did you learn about pleasure? Hopefully, this makes you think. And as Oprah would say, maybe you're going to have an aha moment, right? I personally learned shame around pleasure because I learned that only bad girls had sex before marriage. And of course, I was sexually abused. So I felt shame around pleasure and intimacy for a long time. But I healed. I healed. I recognized that it was not the right story, and I rewrote it. Right. So this brings us to the conversation this week with Andrea Lee. All right. Hopefully, none of you that's listening to this right now has experienced this. Andrea's story reveals the other side of this truth. What happens when pleasure and intimacy are not just restricted, but violated? When the body becomes unsafe, when trust is shattered by the very people meant to protect you. Andrea was sexually abused by her father and emotionally unsupported by her mother. As a result, she learned to disconnect just from not just from others, but from herself, from feeling, from desire, from joy. And here's the part that matters deeply. This wasn't a failure of strength, it was a survival strategy. When a child experiences trauma, the nervous system adapts. The body learns it's not safe to feel, it's not safe to want, it's not safe to be seen. And that is why some girls cover themselves up from head to toe and become unattractive to men because they don't want anyone looking at them. They don't want to be touched because they feel that when they're attractive or when they look good, then it invites unwanted attention. And these lessons don't disappear when we become adults. They show up in our relationships, they show up in our marriages, in our bedrooms, and in our ability or inability to receive love. Yeah, you've got this armor in front of you, and you don't let anyone in because you've learned that letting people in is unsafe. But Andrea's story does not end in trauma. Like mine, she rewrote it, right? After years of therapy, deep healing, and courageous work, she reclaimed her body, her voice, and her capacity for connection. She's now married, and she chose to give back by volunteering in a rape crisis center, helping other women survive what she once endured. And that's what healing looked like, ladies. Not erasing the past, but transforming it into purpose. And then next week, our conversation with Vanessa Bennett expand this theme even further into motherhood. Vanessa challenges what she calls the motherhood myth, the belief that good mothers must sacrifice their identity, their needs, and their joy. The pleasure word again, right? And the question we ask is simple but unsettling. Where did she and other women learn this? Most learned it from their own mothers, from generations of women who survived by self erasure. They believed that love meant depletion, who confused martyrdom with their worth. I'm pretty sure you know these women. Hopefully, you're not one of them. This too is childhood trauma, passed down quietly, lovingly, and unconsciously from our mothers or grandmothers or aunts, right? Anything that we see, we believe that that's how it's supposed to do. So when we look at these three conversations together, a pattern emerges. How we learn to experience pleasure, how we learn to disconnect from our bodies, and how we learn to abandon ourselves for others. All of it traces back to childhood. But here's the hope that I want you to hear today. What we learned can be unlearned. The story can be rewritten. What was modeled can be remodeled. What was taken can be reclaimed. The last one is a little bit hard, but if you work on it, like Andrea had years and years of therapy to reclaim what was taken to her at 4 years old, right? So healing is not about blaming our parents, though, or reliving our pain. It's about passionately understanding the story so we can choose a different ending. So, as we continue this month, I invite you to reflect gently. What did you learn about pleasure? What did you learn about intimacy? And about your right to feel joy? And what would it look like today to rewrite that lesson? Because trauma may shape us, but it does not get the final word. All three of these women rewrote their stories. I hope that they provide inspiration for you if you too have childhood trauma. So, I invite you to listen to these women's stories because it was very hard for them to tell it, right? And they're telling it because they want to make a difference in another woman's lives. So, wherever you listen to your podcasts, definitely on YouTube or Spotify so you can actually see video of this. But if you're listening to this on an um, audio channel, then yes, I invite you to tune in to the Transform Your Mind YouTube channel or the Transform Your Mind Spotify channel and watch and listen to these stories and leave a comment. Tell us how you are going to rewrite your story if, like you've come from childhood trauma. Like me, I've come from childhood trauma. And there is not much left from that. I have rewritten my story and I am making a difference in the world by helping women get through their trauma and rewrite their story. That's why my show is called Transform Your Mind. Transform your mind and your mindset on what happened to you, right? Because it's not you, it's something that happened to you. All right. Enough preaching for today. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you would like and subscribe and watch these shows and support these women. Thank you very much for tuning in. Until next time, namaste.